Good evening. It's now 6:30, and I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening is announcements. Our next City Council workshop will be held on October 23rd, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. for an update on the various transportation projects planned for Victoria, including Highway 5. If you're not able to attend or watch the October 23rd Council workshop, join us for our next Donuts in Victoria event on October 16th, where our city engineer will give an update on transportation projects planned and happening in Victoria. Donuts in Victoria is held at the Victoria Recreation Center on October 16th at 9 a.m. In other news, there's still time to visit the Victoria Fire Department's Community Open House event tonight, which goes on until 8 p.m. at the Victoria Fire Station. And that is the only announcements this evening. I do have a proclamation that I will read from the desk. Proclamation 2024-08 is a proclamation to recognize October 6th through 12th as Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the City of Victoria is committed to the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Victoria, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas the Victoria Fire Department responded to 438 calls for service in 2023, and whereas the economic loss due to fire in Victoria was estimated to be at $6,760 in 2023. And whereas smoke alarms sense smoke well before you can and alert you to fire in which you may have as little as 2 minutes to escape safely. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in home fires in half. And residents should be sure everyone in the home understands the sounds of the alarms and knows how to respond. Whereas residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape are more prepared and will likely, therefore, be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas residents should make sure their smoke and CO alarms have been tested, are operating correctly, and meet the needs of all their family members, including those with sensory or physical disabilities. And whereas first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education, residents are responsive to public education measures, are better able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. The 2024 Fire Prevention Week theme, Smoke Alarms, Make Them Work for You, is important to learn the different sounds of smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Deb McMillan of the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim October 6th through 12th as Fire Prevention Week and urge all the citizens of Victoria to support the many public safety activities and efforts the Victoria Fire Department and other emergency service organizations. The next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt the final agenda.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda this evening is open forum. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in an application form that will be coming to the council at a future date? Seeing none, next is our consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine administrative and do not require deliberation or are housekeeping items required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent agenda items to be considered for a separate discussion and vote?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Any members of the council wishing to pull something from the consent agenda?
I think 5.1.
5.1, Councilmember Gunderson. And anyone in the audience who would like an item pulled for separate discussion and vote? Seeing none, clerk, please let the record reflect that item 5.1 has been pulled for further discussion. Council, can I get a motion for the balance of the consent agenda, please?
Motion to adopt the balance of the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Now on to item 5.1, which was removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and vote. Councilmember Gunderson, please.
I removed it. I want a clarification. We had a request to remove a letter from a resident. Would we need to strip it from the minutes too? Take it completely.
So, Mayor, members of the council, so there is, I'm gonna start, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but, so the permanent retention of our agenda packet, that letter will be part of that permanent file. It just will not be available via the website unless somebody specifically requests it. Then we will provide it. And it will be part of the permanent record. It just won't be able to be viewed online.
Okay. So has that been done, or do we need to act on that?
Councilmember Gunderson, Mayor, members of the council, yes, that has been done. We were able to make that private, meaning that we can still see it. It is still part of the agenda packet. It just isn't able to be viewed by the public unless it's specifically requested.
Okay.
Very good.
That's it.
Attorney Vos, anything to add to that?
No, I just, Councilmember Gunderson, I'm looking at the minutes. I hadn't looked at them before the meeting. I'm not sure I'm not finding what they say about the letter, but, the minutes, of course, just have to reflect what happened at the meeting. And
I didn't know if the letter got inserted into that as well, as a part of that process.
I wouldn't think that it would have gotten inserted as a separate document in the minutes, but it's probably just referred to. So, I doubt that the minutes need correcting, but I guess I'd leave that to you if you wanted to propose something. So,
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just a clarification: the request for the letter to be removed from online came after the meeting, so there was not council direction at the meeting, so the minutes would not reflect that direction. Just clarification for anybody in the public listening to us this evening. So.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Gunderson, anything else? No. All right, then I will entertain a motion to approve the regular minutes of the September 9th, 2024 meeting as submitted.
Motion.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now moving on to the regular agenda. First item on the agenda this evening is item 6.1, which is our preliminary 2025 tax levy and general fund budget. Kicking us off this evening is Assistant City Manager and Finance Director Tricia Pollack. Ms. Pollack, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we are in our fourth meeting for the 2025 budget process, where we will adopt the max tax levy. So just to do a kind of an overview of where we've been and where we are now. Currently, the general fund budget includes $2.7 million in transfers to capital funds and $6.8 million in operating expenditures. In order to achieve a balanced budget and maintain a fund balance of at least 30% of the following year's operating expenditures at year end, $9.5 million in revenues are needed and $92,000 increase in unassigned fund balance. Looking at the general fund budget in more detail, on the revenue side, we have $8 million in taxes and franchise fee revenues. Those franchise fees are for cable, so not the electric and the gas, which we reviewed at the last month's workshop. The remaining $1.5 million comes from licenses, permits, charges for services, and other revenues, which also include interest earnings. The expenditure breakdown is general government, 2.8 million, public safety, about 2.1, public works, just over $1 million, and parks and rec at 881,000. And then again, the capital fund transfers of 2.6 million. Max tax levy is 12.47% higher than in 2024. This did not change from our last workshop. The tax capacity rate is about 30.37%, which is 1.94% higher than 2024. And the breakdown of the $9 million levy would be $1 million for debt service, and the other $8 million is general fund levy. The net tax capacity is about 4.1% higher than in 2024. And the median home value actually went down slightly, about 0.75%. The tax on the median value home will be about $1,687 annually. And the year-end population is expected to increase about 3.5%. Which results in a tax per capita of $717 approximately. Looking at the long-term financial plan over the next 10 years, we're projecting a tax capacity rate to be between 30 and 39%. And we would also be able to maintain that 30% unassigned fund balance. 30% is of the following year's operating expenditures. We anticipate a continue in growth in population and the number of households. So we're looking at about 12,590 estimated population next year, and then adding up to about 16,000 in 2034. Does council have any questions or comments for staff?
Okay, council, this is to certify our max tax levy. The levy cannot go any higher than this. It can come down, but it cannot go up. So any questions for Trish and her team? All right, seeing none.
So the next step would be staff to ask council to approve 2 resolutions.
Very good. Council, any more discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain the first motion.
Motion for a resolution approving a preliminary tax levy for the city of Victoria for collection in 2025 in the amount of $9,034,327.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I will entertain a second motion, please.
Motion for a resolution approving a preliminary 2025 budget for the general fund.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 6.2, which is the final plat and PUD, also known as a planned unit development for Victoria Ridge Residential Development Project. For the public's benefit, Victoria Ridge was previously referred to as Victoria South and has been renamed. So City Planner Mr. Brian McCann will present this item. Mr. McCann, the floor is yours when you are ready.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. We did review this at the last meeting on September 9th, but it was tabled to the next meeting. So this may be new to a few council members this evening, but it will be familiar to the 2 that were in attendance at the last meeting. As you're aware, our final plat process is where we look at the final details of a development and where we look at finalizing a development agreement. So for this specific development, for its location and existing conditions, it's located south of the Marsh Hollow development and the railroad in our South Growth area. It's adjacent to County Road 11. It's currently a vacant farmstead with fields, some wetlands to the west, with a portion of West Chaska Creek to the north. They did have some structures that were demolished and removed as shown in the latest aerial. So for this phase, it's the first of a planned 3-phase development. It currently has an agricultural zoning after receiving annexation from Laketown Township. The applicant tonight is requesting a planned unit development with underlying R4 high-density residential. They're proposing 70 townhome units with a clubhouse as well as some outlots for wetlands and future phases of development. Their net density comes out at about 9.5 units per acre. You may realize that's lower than our guided 12 to 36 units per acre. Since this is a phased development with an anticipated apartment building for the second phase, the comprehensive plan amendment is not required per the Met Council's guidance. As you're aware, our planned unit development process involves getting input at sketch plat, where we finalize the details at preliminary plat, and then the ordinance is adopted at final plat this evening. Here are a list of standards that were included in your packet that the applicant is proposing to deviate from, and is also included in the ordinance in the packet for you this evening. Our landscaping and tree preservation requirements, they are meeting most of these standards. They are meeting the minimum 25% open space required for the development. They're also planting 263 trees and shrubs throughout the development and meeting the spacing requirements along city streets for boulevard trees. They also have 2 40-foot buffers that they've provided on the plan adjacent to County Road 11. Part of the deviation for that is a 2-to-1 unmaintained slope compared to our required 3-to-1 slope. They do need to provide renderings as well for foundation plantings around the apartment building and the townhomes, but they are proposing 29% removal of the trees existing on the site, which means they have to provide 47 trees. As you can see, they're already providing 263, so they're meeting that requirement. Regarding the parking and pedestrian connections, they're meeting the minimum requirements with 2 spaces per townhome unit, with at least 1.5 of those enclosed throughout the development. And then the parking deviation is part of the ordinance this evening for the apartment building. They're required to have 2 spaces per unit, with 1 of them being enclosed. The deviation is for those enclosed units. They're asking for a slight reduction in the number of enclosed parking stalls, bringing them down to 1.89 spaces per unit. They're also providing trail connections along the Collector Road and along County Road 11 on the east side of the development, with future improvements to that road. For park dedication for this phase specifically, it would be 1.86 acres or $196,000. We are expecting a blend of land with trail dedications and fees. They are not proposing a park with this development, although they do have some private open space areas for the residents. For the access and streets, as I mentioned, they'll be coming from County Road 11 with a collector road that will extend down to the south to the future commercial and flex employment areas. They are proposing a private 65-foot wide corridor, private loop with private drives to access the townhomes from. County road improvements aren't anticipated until 2028, actually, not 2027, but the city and the developer are exploring an agreement to conduct these improvements prior to the county's reconstruction schedule. The site utilities are proposed to come from the Marsh Hollow development to the north under the railroad tracks. One condition of the preliminary plat for this development was that well number 6 must be completed and permitted. We're not quite there yet. It hasn't been permitted by the DNR yet, so we are revising the condition in your packet. It's well number 6 must be completed and permitted for pumping prior to installation of sod in the development. And then for stormwater management, they have to abide by the rules of the CCWMO, including wetland impacts subject to their rules. Buffers needed to be platted as outlots, and the pond access must meet our standards. So here are the revised standards based on what they've submitted since the September 9th meeting. There are still a few items that staff has to work through with the developer, but they have provided some title work and a traffic memo, which was included with your case this evening, which has been reviewed by Carver County. And we've received those comments and passed them on to the developer. Our Planning Commission did review this at their September 3rd meeting and held a public hearing. We did not receive any comments from the public at that meeting, and they recommended a 5-0 vote for approval. Here are the conditions that were included with your packet. The new ones from the last meeting based on their resubmittals are highlighted in green for those of you who were at the September 9th meeting, including compliance with Carver County's comments for the traffic impact analysis, entering into an agreement for the utility extension with the railroad, and then compliance with the city attorney's review of the maintenance obligations that were provided by the developer. So with that, I have 3 sample motions for you on the screen this evening, each one to adopt, table, or deny each request. Staff can stand for questions. A representative of the development is in the audience tonight, and another one is joining remotely as well.
All right, very good. Council, we have 3 motions to consider this evening, which were tabled from our September 9th meeting, because we need, requires 4/5 of the council, so we all have to agree to this. So, council, let's talk about questions, comments for Mr. McCann or any of the developers. Anything from council?
I have a couple things.
Yeah, Councilmember Roberts, please.
Can you go back to the slide about parking? I just want to clarify. So it says 2 spaces are required with one of them being enclosed, and then it says deviation to 1.89 with a reduction. So 1.89 would be the 2 required, right? You're reducing the 2 to 1.89. But I thought you said, or it says here, reduction in enclosed parking too, so that would be below 1. Is that correct as well?
Mayor and Councilmember Roberts, essentially, yes, to highlight here, they're meeting all of the surface parking requirements, so they're meeting the minimum number for that. They're just asking for a reduction in the enclosed underground parking proposed with the apartment building.
Okay. And then about Highway 11 upgrades, there's some negotiation about like when that, so would that be similar to Huntersbrook potentially, like where that stretch, like they potentially would take care of that stretch there if that's figured out, I guess?
Correct. Yeah, we're talking with them and the developer of the adjacent site to the south, because the County Road 11 improvements are necessary for both of those projects, and they're on a similar time schedule here. So we're working through that with some guidance from the city attorney and how to work that into the development agreements.
Okay. And then my last question just is, so this is phase 1, right? Did you say 4, right? Or 3? Okay. Is there plans for a park in the other phases potentially? Or I guess my concern would be, right, like we're getting farther out. There's not really much over there. I know like there's some parks in other neighborhoods over there, but we've got the train tracks that are in the way. So I guess, just thinking about people living in this area, I know the council can constantly, we talk about, right, do we want a bigger park out there somewhere? But it's hard to, that's in the future and we don't really know what's going on there, but we do know this development is coming in. And so I do have concerns about, not an easily accessible park for a lot of families here, with these being townhomes, probably young families and such. So, that's all I have for now.
All right. Mr. McCann, please.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Roberts. When this development went through the preliminary plat process, where most of their entitlements are granted to move forward with the final plat and the final development of details, it gets a little more difficult to include a city park once they have prepared and finalized plans for all of this development without a park. I believe this was discussed at the preliminary plat phase, but just to the north on County Road 11, not too far away, is the Huntersbrook Park that the community could easily access, and there is also a park being planned in the Marsh Hollow development. So 2 parks are closely available for this development, but none are planned with this development specifically.
And can you remind me, because is there, right with the railroad tracks there, will there be a trail connection between those 2?
Yes.
Can you remind me? Okay.
How is that looking? Is that over the tracks, along the road? Okay, thank you. All right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Council, other questions, comments? Okay, very good. On that note, we are considering three different motions for approval or denial. Mr. McCann, would you please walk us through each of those again?
Yes, absolutely. So the first motion would be to adopt, table, or deny the resolution approving the preliminary plat, or the final plat, excuse me. The second motion would be for the ordinance for rezoning, and then the third motion would be to approve the summary publication of that ordinance.
Okay, very good. With that, council, I will entertain a motion.
Do we need to rename it if we're calling it something different?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes, that's a good point. Yes, I would change your motion for that to be Victoria Ridge and not Victoria South.
Very good, thank you. Nice catch. Councilmember Gunderson with that. Would you make a motion, please?
Motion to adopt the resolution approving the final plat for Victoria Ridge.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consider another motion, please.
A motion to adopt the ordinance approving rezoning from agricultural to planned unit development, PUD, for the Victoria Ridge residential development.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And the third and final motion, please.
Motion to adopt the resolution approving summary publication of the ordinance.
Very good. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Next item, 6.3, which is an overview of the Metropolitan Council Imagine 2050 proposed land use policies. Leading our discussion this evening, Community and Economic Development Director Jen Brewington, along with Bolton and Mink Planning Consultant Jenny Faulkner. Ms. Faulkner, Ms. Brewington, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Council. Mayor. All right, so tonight we're going to give you some information about the Metropolitan Council 2050 Imagine Plan. So the reason why we're here is communities within the Metropolitan Council region are legally required to update their comprehensive plan every 10 years. Before each update cycle, the Met Council releases new policies that plans must align with. Recently, the Met Council has introduced the draft policies for the Imagine 2050 plan, which is currently in a public comment phase before its final adoption. There are 5 draft policy plans consisting of transportation, parks, land use, water, and housing. And staff have prioritized the review of the land use policy. And those key changes for Victoria are increased in required minimum density for sewered areas from 3 to 4 units per acre, more critical review of sewer expansion in unsewered areas, and requirements to inventory greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll go through these a little bit further throughout the presentation. The Imagine 2050 timeline started with research and writing from 2022 to mid-2024. During this time, communities give input, which continues until 2025. Draft policies are created between late 2023 and mid-2024, then revised and finalized by 2025. In 2025, there is a public comment period, and the final policies are adopted and put into action between 2025 and 2026. So the Met Council sets guidelines through community designations and regional land use policies. Victoria is classified as a suburban edge community, which is located on the outskirts of the metropolitan urban service area, known as the MUSA, and mainly developed after the 1990s. MUSA is a designated area within a metropolitan region where urban services such as sewer, water, infrastructure are planned to be provided by regional authorities. The purpose of the MUSA is to manage and control urban growth by ensuring that services are concentrated in areas that can support higher density development, preventing urban sprawl. This is a visual of community designations. Regional land use policies are built around the shared features of different areas. So these features shape the community designations, which are based on key factors that guide the growth and support future development within the region. To achieve these regional goals established in the Imagine 2050 plan, the Met Council identified 8 land use objectives with associated land use policies and actions for both local government and the Met Council to implement. In the staff report, I did summarize these with objectives, key policies, and actions, and tonight we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what that means for the City of Victoria. All right, so Objective 1, Action 2. This explains the Met Council will review requests from municipalities already connected to regional wastewater systems when they seek to expand services to new areas. This evaluation may include a look-back provision, which considers the municipality's past performance in meeting density goals. The look-back could influence decisions about future density and the MUSA extensions. There is also a discussion about applying the look-back provision more broadly to density requirements. Staff is currently seeking clarification on how this process would be applied and what impacts this may have. All right, this is the big one for Victoria. The overall community density requirement for suburban edge communities will increase from 3 to 4 units per acre, which will likely require the change to our future land use maps and plans. And however, the communities are still allowed to average density across the entire area. Currently, Victoria's comprehensive plan sets a citywide density at 3.47 units per acre. And this means that adjustments will be necessary to meet new targets.
Okay, back that up a second.
Yep. Here we go.
Okay. So we currently say 3.47, and that applies to everything within our boundary. So we can get to that by having some apartment buildings, some multifamily homes, some single-family homes, and then some larger lots, single-family lots. We can get there. What they're saying is you will now have to get to 4, and will this averaging still be allowed?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, carry on.
All right, and there's some possible strategies to achieve what we just discussed to get more than 4 units per acre. So one could be to increase the minimum density of 1 or more future land use categories. So increasing the minimum density within certain categories means allowing or require more housing units per acre in those areas.
Okay, excuse me a second. So we have a lot of marshland here. Is marshland counted towards those acres?
No.
It is not. It's buildable acres. Okay.
Madam Mayor, it's exempted from the calculation, land and shoreland and flood.
Okay.
It's kind of taken out from the
Okay.
density calculation.
Okay.
Stormwater ponds and HOA areas are not. So the more stormwater pond areas and HOA area you have, the more housing units you're going to need throughout the city, because those are not netted out.
Okay.
Okay. Another strategy could be to increase the acres dedicated to higher density future land use categories. So allocating more land to higher density housing like apartments, townhomes, or multifamily units. Another one could be to reduce the acres dedicated to low density future land use categories. So cutting down the amount of land designated for low density development, such as single family homes and those larger lots.
Toward side yard setback is going to be affected.
Here's an example of a change from 4 units per acre. So developments like Whispering Hills and Laketown. So this would increase the increased density could, yes, be smaller lot sizes, potential strain on infrastructure, increased traffic, and then just changes to the overall aesthetic and character of the neighborhoods. So these impacts will need to be considered as we do our future planning. All right, next one. So action 3 has a lot of sub-actions within this, which will impact the Met Council review of our comp plan and administration of comp plan amendments. So communities need to develop long-term strategies to achieve specific density goals for each decade. The Met Council will assess whether proposed changes to city or regional comprehensive plans are realistically achievable. And the Met Council is adopting a programmatic and performance-based approach to how density requirements are applied. Now, this can mean that instead of rigid rules, they will implement tailored programs and assess projects based on how well they meet key objectives such as affordable housing, infrastructure capacity, and environmental goals. We have not seen, however, in detail with this draft in the land use policy that provides any insight on how these actions will actually be administered. Action 4 focuses on ensuring city allocates enough land at a minimum density to meet its shared regional future affordable housing need. The city will be given a system statement that provides us a number of units required for affordable housing. The minimum has increased from 8 units per acre to 10. I do want to note that the City of Victoria may not qualify for any of the affordable housing resources and programs that are currently in existence, and that could be due to just our economic status, access to transit. So there's a lot of things that would prohibit us from actually capturing some of those dollars. The next one, action 6, this action means that zoning and land use policies in residential areas should permit a mix of housing types rather than limiting the area to only one kind of housing. So just like single family homes. So for example, within single residential zones, there could be single family homes, townhomes, duplexes, and even smaller apartment buildings. By diversifying housing options, communities can better meet the needs of different populations groups, such as young families, seniors, lower income households. And we have briefly discussed having ADUs within the community. If allowed, this could be a way that we could allow and permit them within the City of Victoria. An example here on the screen would be the Marsh Hollow development. There's different types of housing within this area, so this would be a good example of that one. The next one, objective 2, this focuses on maximizing growth in areas well served by transit, bicycle, and pedestrian infrastructure. Developments should be concentrated near transit hubs and corridors, like bus or train stations, to make public transportation more accessible and to reduce car dependency. Although we are not immediately adjacent to transit hubs, we do strongly support these initiatives. We are also investing in pedestrian overpasses, underpass on Highway 5 and Rolling Acres Road, while our commercial and industrial growth areas are located along major highways. Additionally, we continue to prioritize pedestrian-friendly developments in all of our new projects. So for example, we've got the Pet Overpass and the Madeline Creek Underpass, which are examples that we use to connect our pedestrians to the rest of our community. Objective 3, this emphasizes the importance of community connections, safety, and accessibility, ensuring that residents have opportunities to gather, access services, and meet daily needs close to home. We have developments that have created a central green space, encouraging community gathering, enhancing walkability, not only within the development itself, but also providing easy pedestrian access to future adjacent commercial areas. Council has discussed previously wanting more pocket neighborhoods, basically those small clusters of homes that are typically centered around a shared green space. And this might be something that will be impacted with these new policies in place. So for example, we've got 2 developments where we focus on a central green, so Victoria Ridge, and then the Downtown West project. Objective 4, this highlights the importance of prioritizing land use and development activities that protect, restore, and enhance natural systems at all scales. In 2025, a key priority will be advancing the vision for our Western growth area, and we have begun discussing conservation corridors, concepts that would really safeguard our natural habitats and lakes, while providing more of a scenic and natural connection between Highway 5 and the southern growth area. Staff believes that this objective is already being taken into account with all of our new developments that have been proposed. Objective 5 aims to provide housing opportunities that meet the diverse needs of all communities. It emphasizes the need for inclusive housing policies to overcome and effect discriminatory practices. We already have a strong example of a mixed income housing development, the Able Light community. However, funding these projects remain a challenge for all communities, just like I had mentioned before, with those dollars that aren't really accessible to us at the moment. An example of that able light that I just discussed. And objective 6, as the regional planning moves forward, it's essential not only to recognize the historical wrongs in land use policies, but also to collaborate with communities most affected by past discrimination, working together to create a more equitable future. City staff have reviewed these policies and found no concerns regarding compliance within Victoria's current planning framework. Objective 7, this objective focuses on implementing land use and development practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote climate adaptation, and create resilient communities. A greenhouse gas inventory will be required. This is a detailed report of gases that contribute to global warming, either released into or absorbed from the atmosphere in a specific area, like a city, or over a set period, typically 1 year. It identifies the source of these gases and measures how much is emitted, giving a clear picture of how human activities impact climate change. And it is unclear what this inventory will need to cover, what the scope of the review will be, and what format is actually desired. All right, objective 8. This emphasizes improving economic health of the Twin Cities by addressing racial inequalities and supporting inclusive growth. The goal is to revitalize neglected areas, develop job skills, support sustainable industries, remove barriers from underserved communities, and encourage small businesses and entrepreneurship in marginalized areas. I wanted to show something that the Met Council provided for us. So the City of Victoria is projected to experience significant growth between 2020 and 2050, and population is expected to nearly double. So on the screen you can see here where our population is forecasted for 2050. Along with this, the number of households is anticipated to grow, adding 3,985 new households. And employment opportunities are also set to rise with an additional 1,467 jobs. This chart visualizes the projected growth in population, household, and employment in the City of Victoria from 2020 to 25 under 2 planning scenarios, the Thrive 2040 plan and the Imagine 2050 plan. The Imagine 2050 scenario predicts a higher growth across all 3 areas compared to the Thrive 2040 plan. And next steps, so the public comment period on the draft policy plans and community forecasts will end October 7th, 2024. Following this, the Imagine 2050 plan will be adopted in January 2025. By September of 2025, system statements will be released, allowing communities to begin drafting their 2050 comprehensive plans. Over the course of 2026 and 2027, these comp plans are supporting plans will be finalized and adopted. And then finally, the deadline for submitting these plans to the Met Council is December 2028. So a lot of dates coming up here. And that is the end of that, but staff is here for any questions and discussions, and I did put some prompt discussion points up here on the screen to kind of go through the information that was just thrown at you real quickly here. But again, this is a very large document. There's a lot of objectives, but we are focusing on the land use objectives that are going to impact Victoria.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jen. First and foremost, thank you for taking that big fat document and boiling it down into something that we can digest as a council and consider some of these policy questions. Should we not meet the objectives they've outlined, what's the blowback? Do they withhold water and sewer access? Talk about that a little bit. What's the...
Mayor, members of the council, the tools that we're seeing and experiencing today in other communities is withholding of sewer permits for projects that don't meet minimum density. They can also withhold funding if you were to apply for grants for them. And certainly, I think in the past they've used a point system if you've met this for other funding, transportation funding, affordable housing funding. So not one-to-one, but there is a correlation there, at least historically.
Okay. And then talk through the look-back provision a little bit. I'm a little concerned about, once stuff is already built and you're moving along and you're on to the next thing, talk about that a little.
Mayor, members of the council, in my discussions with various Met Council folks and working also with other communities, the Met Council staff does not have a clear answer on this. They know that there are communities today that have not met their goals from the last comp plan. They've pushed their higher densities to the end of the 2040 planning cycle. They're not there yet. So they're concerned that they're not doing what they said they would or meeting their fair share, I'll call it. So they're trying to figure out a way how to hold those communities more accountable. It is a political hot potato. To your point, Mayor, how do you go back and hold a city accountable for future development for something that happened when you may not have even been elected? It happened 10 years ago. That is why communities need to comment and send your comments to the Met Council. How far is the look back period? What are the implications to you as communities? And perhaps in your view, it doesn't seem fair, right? So very good point. I wish I had answers, but I have the same questions that you do.
Mayor?
Yes,
I can't, I'm biting my tongue, but I've given up. I can't
please.
bite my tongue.
Councilmember Vos, I'm
Yeah.
very curious. You have to say here.
Just two comments, and this is probably taking the points made by staff already, and maybe just putting the lawyer's spin on them. As to your question, Mayor, about what if we don't meet the goals of the Met Council, my initial thought was I could interpret that question two ways. One is, what if you fail to meet the Met Council's planning goals in your own comp plan update? And of course, there is a comp plan creation and review by Met Council process. And so that gets meted out. A city that is not meeting the Met Council's view of its goals and how that city must meet them, there is a process for a city that isn't doing that in its comp plan update. And it's an iterative process where they get to comment back to you about the ways in which they believe your plan doesn't comply with their overarching plan, and changes can be made, and that's a staff-intensive process, and you've all had some experience seeing that go on, and we're sort of preparing for it now. The other way your question, though, could be interpreted is, what if after that's occurred? We have a comp plan now. We have a comp plan that is past Met Council approval, and it's in place. We now have projects that the Met Council believes are not meeting its goals. Well, of course, that means that the Met Council is saying that your particular project isn't meeting your own comp plan, right? Because you've now got a comp plan in place that the Met Council has approved. And so for a particular project to not meet the Met Council's goals, they have to be saying you're not meeting your own comp plan. And so I agree with the point made that it appears that the Met Council is using the withholding of sewer permits, or they have done that in some cases that we're familiar with. It's not really clear yet to me legally how that's going to work going forward, because that is the Met Council saying you city are not properly applying your own comp plan to this project. And there's not statutory authority for the Met Council to say, if we disagree with you, city, about the way you're interpreting your comp plan, we can, at the Met Council level, withhold permits. That's something that I'm going to need to be more educated on. If that's really the Met Council's view, I'm going to have to understand legally how they can be taking that view, because it's not clear to me how they can take that view. So a lot of words there, I know, but I wanted to drill down on your question, which I think has two ways of being viewed.
Yeah, I feel like this whole thing is fraught with problems, questions, things that we can't be held accountable for. Just a lot of concerns around the expectations that are being placed on communities, and asking us to take a look at what might be happening in 30 years from now. It's just a little bit crazy in my mind. Okay, Council. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, Councilmember Gunderson, please.
You talked about upping from 8 to 10 affordable unit, and then said in the same breath that it said we can't qualify for current things. I flashed to modern day shanty towns if we're not qualifying for any dollars to help build affordable housing, because land out here is at a premium. To be able to put anything that's affordable, our developers are slashing. I mean, they're slashing product. They're barely building. It'll take forever to build because they're not putting the labor behind it. How can we leverage that to say, we want to build this, but you're not allowing us to qualify for any of the dollars that are required that other communities are getting? And we are probably a net exporter of tax dollars into other communities. So is there leverage for us to be able to get some of these opportunities that are available?
Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Gunderson, members of the council. Yes, excellent point. I just think it would be helpful for the council and then our residents to understand that this is also something that we have taken very seriously. As you all know, for the work that we're doing on with Downtown West, we have applied for Met Council funding for different grants to help offset those costs, to meet some of the affordable housing goals of our community. And it is very difficult for us to compete for those funds because we don't have transit here. And because of the higher incomes and the higher tax capacities or the market values that we have here. So it becomes very difficult for us to actually compete for those funds. We have provided official on-the-record feedback to the Met Council over the last several years about that. Other communities that suburban and suburban edge communities have provided similar feedback. I think 2 years ago now, right around that ballpark time, the Met Council did change kind of their formula and their weights as it relates to the competitiveness and how they score weight some of these items to make it more competitive for suburban and suburban edge communities. However, we've not benefited from those changes yet. And then I did want to note that just this year, we were on the record with Met Council about our ongoing concerns about we've been actively seeking these projects. We have been applying for grant funding. It's not that we don't want more affordable housing in the community. It just becomes very difficult for us to compete in the financial realm out in the suburban edge communities for that funding. But it is not because we're not trying or we don't see a need. We do have and share the need as other communities in the metro and in the state are also experiencing. So just wanted to make sure you are all aware of those conversations that have been happening.
But it's saying that we're being held, we have to have this. Like it's saying we have to have affordable housing, right? Is that how I'm reading that? Going from 8 to 10, how are we reading that?
Yeah.
Well,
Hang on a second. Let's, Ms. Faulkner. Yeah.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, you have to provide the opportunity for affordable housing. So you have to have land guided, presumably at a higher density, means it's more affordable. So far, stuff we've read, and historically, cities have not been held directly accountable for that for the reasons that have been stated. Okay. But I believe there will be more pressure to do more than you're doing now, and as much as you can, coming short of saying thou shalt do this. Yeah. It's all the tools and what you can do to get there without them mandating it.
I mean, if we're never going to be able to get any of it, if we're not going to be able to compete, how can we build it? And spinning in circles here, and I wish the Met Council, I wish the Met Council would figure that out. Yeah. We're just spinning in circles, saying that we're going to do something that we're never going to do.
Or we're never going to have the ability to do.
We're never going to have the ability.
So separate but related, I know that the state legislature spent a whole bunch of money on affordable housing projects. I don't know if staff has had an opportunity to take a look at the requirements of those funds yet, or if they've become available. Can anybody comment even on that?
In my opinion, Mayor and members of the council, I'll just say there's more tools coming your way with the sales tax dollars to be used for affordable housing. That goes to every community, as far as I know, some portion. So you will be getting money to spend on this effort. I don't know the dollar amount. Ms. Hardy probably does, but that's a great brand new tool.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, great question. We've actually, Jen and I and Brian have been having some conversations with the county CDA, who are experts in affordable housing as they deal with that on a more regular basis. And so they have a better understanding of the tools and have that expertise in-house. So we've been working very closely with them to really understand. There was a lot to unpack from the legislative session. There were a lot of unknowns about how those tools would be distributed, how we could use them. There's some timelines associated with it. So we are not getting a lot of money in the sense that it won't be enough for us to actually fund a big portion of a significant portion of a project. I think we're talking a couple $100,000 at most. Do you recall, Jen? I'm looking at Jen or Brian. Do you either of you? It was very little.
Okay, a couple $100,000 doesn't even cover.
And I don't know if it was even that much, so we can circle back and get you the right number. But when as I understand it, we have 3 years to use the funds. So each year we'll get our distribution, and then there are certain steps that we need to take to commit those dollars to a very specific project. So you're not, my understanding is you're not able to throw it in a fund and wait for, you have to actually dedicate it to a specific project. And then you have 3 years to make that happen. And if you don't utilize it within the criteria that is set out for the use of those funds, and you don't use it within that time period, you have to give it back to the state. So while we are going to have some tools, it will be very difficult for us to apply that in a meaningful way. And so we're still trying to learn, what does that mean for us? How will that help us be able to contribute to any developer who's looking to bring a more affordable project here to our community?
All right, thank you. I don't want to get down that rabbit hole, but to Councilmember Gunderson's point, now we're spinning in circles again. We've got money we can't use for anything meaningful. And
we can't put it in a fund to use it for something
right,
meaningful.
It's crazy. All right, Councilmember Wright.
Yes,
please.
can we go back to the dates slide on like the public comment and all that? Right there, yeah. Okay, so public comment's already ending in a couple weeks, and there's no, that's it for public comment completely on the, okay.
Yep, that's my understanding.
So I guess you've got 2 weeks for any public comment on any of this. After that, so I'm just wondering the best approach.
Right,
with all
well,
that.
And how likely are they to change, right? Like, do we see right? They may take comment, but do they just throw them away, basically? Or do they actually take comments and say, you know what, that's a good point. I'm going to make a tweak here or there, because it doesn't seem like that happens very often. What?
It doesn't say take and utilize it.
Right, yeah, just as we take comment.
Ms. Brewington, Ms. Faulkner, any comments or thoughts on that?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, in my discussions with Met Council staff, they are encouraging cities to give comments. Jenny's interpretation is that they're steadfast on the density changes, and I agree with your sentiments. I think they'd be hard pressed to move the needle on that. But the look back period is still up in the air. So, I think there are parts of this that the more cities they hear from, and the more pushback that they get on these areas that they haven't kind of set in, even though it's not set in stone yet, but kind of set their hearts on. I think there's still some room for change there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find quite ironic here is the greenhouse gas emissions and saying we need you to build all these rooftops and all this density, and yet you have to protect greenhouse gas emissions. It's ironic and it's counterintuitive. It's crazy making.
And that's not. It's like all of it is like. It's intent versus reality, and right, like their intent, I get it, right? They want different houses, right? They want, which hopefully would make it more affordable, right, with more density. The reality, though, is that even though these yards are going to get smaller and stuff, do we believe that a developer isn't going to still charge the same amount that they were charging for something else? Also, they're saying they want different types of houses, right? But funnily enough, we were just told a couple of months ago that we have too many townhomes and apartments, but now we need more density and more townhomes and apartments. Right. So it's like, it's kind of a big joke, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just contradiction after contradiction. Like, I don't.
And I do want to say and reassure everybody that's listening, our staff has this well in hand, understands where the council's priorities are as far as how we want to build and develop out this community. And they are providing those comments and that feedback to the Met Council about probably in a lot nicer words than we would. So thank you for that. All right, other question. You know, one of the things that I do want to take a look at is those projections around growth. And I know that the Met Council has teed up these projections around growth for a number of years. And my curiosity is, do we meet those projections? Are they right? Are they wrong? Do they play out in the way that they predict?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, in my experience, they come pretty close, actually, surprisingly close. They submit population data every year to the city for kind of checks and balances of what they think, and then the city has an opportunity to review your building permit data or utility data. They do come fairly close, actually. I would say, I can't give you a number, but I was surprised too when we did a look back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ms. Hardy, please.
Mayor, members of the council, just to bounce on what Jenny was sharing, actually this morning, Trish, Jen, and Brian and I met with the Met Council to talk just about that. We looked at our annual data. There's a year lag, so we were looking through 2023 to understand how they're pulling that data. We submit our building permit report every year. They do utilize that along with the census data. And so we were very close, within a couple hundred people. And we just wanted to understand the discrepancy. So how we were counting or making that estimate versus how they were doing it. And I think through that conversation, there were a couple of things that we were able to shore up, and I think we're pretty much right on the money now. Okay. So I'm feeling pretty good about that, and I kind of echo what Jenny mentioned. In my experience, in the 20-plus years I've been doing this type of work, they've come very, very close.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, council, other questions, comments, direction for staff? Any other things you'd like to share?
I think our sentiment was make things realistic, that we're actually going to be able to, that are goal-driven, that are attainable and realistic. Having us put things in that we're never going to do and that aren't realistic is just an exercise in futility. I mean, it just, like, do this and then never do it. Like, if I parented that way, like, wouldn't, nothing would ever get done. Let's just try to get some stuff that we can actually do that's attainable so we can feel good about getting something done.
All right, staff, do you have what you need from council here to go ahead and formalize those comments and submit those on our behalf? We appreciate that. We do. Thank you. And again, thanks for taking that big document and boiling it down into something we can digest. I appreciate that. All right. Final comments before we move on from this? Seeing none, on to item 6.4. This is, we are going to consider the approval of a joint powers agreement with Carver County for construction of Highway 18. Kara Guerin is here to talk that through with us. Ms. Guerin.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Given the number of slide presentations you had this evening, I decided to spare you one and intend to keep this short. This agenda item, though, I do want to note is, I would say, exciting news that is worth pausing to celebrate. So the Highway 18 project that the City of Victoria has been discussing for the 20-plus years I've worked here is been designed and is currently out for bid. So the plan to improve County Road 18, future County Road 18 from Highway 41 to Bavaria Trail is out for bid. And that does include construction of a roundabout at Bavaria and Highway 18. That is an intersection that has long been a source of concern and complaint in its current condition. And then construction of a 2-lane roadway with curb and gutter and a trail along the north side of Highway 18. The other piece that's been added to the project is extension of city sewer and water to serve the 2 homes in Victoria that are located on Highway 18 at 622 and 612 82nd Street. If you recall, the City Council received a petition from those folks back in February to have city sewer and water extended to the property. We did study the feasibility of it and concluded that we were able to provide gravity sewer service to those homes and connect them to our water system. But the piece of good news being shared officially with the City Council tonight is that the city sewer and water extension costs are eligible for the state funding that the project received. So extension of those utilities are included in the project scope at no cost to the city. Therefore, we are not proposing any special assessments to those property owners. So I will segue then to note that this project, I don't have the current estimate in front of me, but it's in excess of $20 million. And again, the City of Victoria is being asked to contribute $0. That is through the hard work of our local legislators obtaining state funding for the project. So the project has state general obligation bonds and state general funds that are being used for all of the elements of the project, including property acquisition and the utility extensions. There's utility extensions occurring in Chaska as well that are funded by the project. So we are being asked to enter into a joint powers agreement with Carver County because the construction, a portion of the construction is occurring within Victoria city limits. That's the reason why we need to have an agreement with them, though the agreement as drafted notes that we don't have a funding responsibility associated with it. Construction is planned for 2025. So we will see some initial work occurring as we move into the fall and winter months related to tree clearing. Utility relocations might occur by private utilities, gas, electric, telephone, those folks. You might see some of that work in advance of the main work starting next summer. We are working on the phasing of the timing of the roundabout construction compared to the phasing of the timing of the other roundabouts planned for construction in 25. So the intersection of Highway 11, Highway 14 at Marsh Lake Road, that planned roundabout had been hoped to be constructed this year, but due to property acquisition delays, that's getting scheduled for the spring. So they're working on coordinating the staging of all of these to not gridlock our community when they're all under construction. So the city attorney has reviewed the JPA and is recommending some revisions to the draft that would be addressed prior to execution of the agreement by the city. The JPA included here is really the template format for all of the projects. So you'll be executing, if I know how to count, 5 of these in the next few months. So we want to get on the same page with the county attorney with the template to make life easier as we move forward to the next ones. But with that, I would be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, we are looking for a motion to approve the agreement.
Very good. Thanks, Ms. Guerin. Exciting news indeed. This is a project that's needed to be done for a very long time. So, council, questions, comments?
When would timing be for, we've talked about thinking about how we want roundabouts to look, or like the inside of it, right? Like when would the timing be for like these?
So for this particular roundabout, staff is recommending minimal type features in the center of this one compared to all of the other ones, just based on its location and prioritizing funding to some of the higher impact areas closer to downtown. So as it sits right now, this one would be grass.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
A motion to approve the joint powers agreement for construction on county state aid highway, County Highway 18, subject to the revisions requested by the city attorney.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
On to 6.5 is an overview of our draft cannabis ordinance. And presenting on that this evening, we're welcoming back our Community Development Director, Jen Brewington, and with her is somebody else with her. I'm sorry, your name's escaping me. Travis. What's your last name? Brierly. Thank you. That was where I was hung up. Mr. Brierly. All right, very good. Thank you. Welcome to both of you. Who's going to start? Travis? Very
Mayor,
good.
Council, good evening. Tonight is just a high-level discussion on the future of a cannabis ordinance that we're doing. Just a little bit of background on the process so far is in 2023, the Minnesota legislature passed a bill to legalize adult use cannabis. They also set up the Office of Cannabis Management, and this is for the cultivation and retail sale of adult use cannabis starting in January of next year. The city, so as we go through this, the city needs to look at many things. Tonight we're just at the high level, looking for feedback from the City Council and the Planning Commission, which we already received feedback from the Planning Commission. The next step is presenting a draft of the ordinance based on the feedback, the public hearing for it, and adoption, and getting everything set in place so we can be prepared when the state starts issuing permits for these type of uses. There's three main items that we want to talk about. The first, we're looking for feedback on the location of permitted retail sales, primarily the Central Business District, our C1, C2, and our Industrial District. We did get comments back from the Planning Commission that related to restrictions to the C1 and C2 districts, as well as the requirement of a conditional use for retail sales. Second question that we're going to look at, or that we would like feedback on tonight, is the hours of operation. And that is just for the retail portion of it. So a lot of the hours that are presented on the screen right now fit into the hours that we have sale for on and off sale liquor. There was feedback to restrict the sale to align with just the off sales, so just something to consider. The third item that we're looking at, or that staff would like feedback on tonight, is restricted distance from specific uses. The distances are listed on here based on what the state says the maximum can be. You'll notice on the left-hand side, 4 X's and 1 green check mark. It's internal staff discussions. This is kind of where we landed with the draft, going through the pros and cons, and we'd like feedback based on that staff discussion. There was Planning Commission feedback restricting sales away from the parks, setting minimum distances. And then the next steps that we'd be looking for is taking the comments, placing everything together, getting the draft. Staff's also working with OCM and keeping up to date on their policies as they're finalizing the rules, as well as working with Carver County and figuring out how the enforcement would work and the administration would work going through this process once everything gets established. The Planning Commission will hold the public hearing, as this would be a zoning ordinance, and then the City Council consideration for adoption. So what we would like to do, Mayor, is get feedback on just item number 1 for the location in the different districts that we have.
Perfect. So describe to us these different districts where they're located.
So Mayor Council, the Central Business District is our main downtown area, which would include downtown west. Our industrial is on the west side of town on Highway 5. And then our C1 and C2 are closer to our South Growth area, which hasn't yet developed. So your C1, your neighborhood commercial district, is your smaller shops, more like that strip mall style. That would be along to serve neighborhood areas. And then your C2 district is your larger areas. So that could be your big box stores or higher end or higher retailers different type of restaurants that serve the community as a whole.
Okay. And then conditional use permits. Are conditional use permits pretty consistent with this kind of a use, or let's talk through that a little bit.
Mayor, Council, conditional use permits is a very interesting topic right now. Underneath the current rules underneath the draft rules that have been presented by OCM, or the Office of Cannabis Management, there's a 30-day response the city is required to do upon receiving an application to verify the establishment could happen. With conditional use permit going through the process on the city side, we're looking at, just for public notice, you have 3 weeks right there, so that gives you about a week left. So that's a part of discussion that's still happening in the background, and we're waiting for final rules. The League of Minnesota Cities, as well as Metro Cities, has weighed in on it and is trying to get some adjustments and some flexibility for different controls that are in place. So we don't really know what's going to happen yet, but the conditional use permit would be to regulate anything from signage to what we want displayed, any glazing on windows and things like that for comfortability and setting the standard for those type of businesses.
Very good. One of the things that I know has been circulating in the past, and Councilmember Vos, I know you're sitting up a little straighter here because we're going to look at you a little bit. But one of the things that we talked about is the county might have some ability to limit the number of licenses within the county, and it's unclear as to how those would be dealt out to the cities within the county. Do you have anything to say about that, or are we too cart before the horse here? Who can take that for me?
Mayor, members of the council. In fact, Dana and I just attended a meeting last week regarding this. They are still trying to figure this out, and it is a discussion. They are having a public hearing, I believe, in November to exactly this point. What does that look like? There is definitely different feedback from each community and how we do this, also with the licensing piece. So if we give them that option to license this for us, that could restrict us in how many we have. But we are, remember, required to have at least one per the 12,000 population.
And my only veneer on that, Mayor and Council, is just, I'm not our expert in our office. I think I say that every time we talk about this, but I have been around it enough now that I know something about it. And I think the concern is just that to the extent Carver County imposes the limit, you might expect that the county is going to consider the 1 per 12,500 limit throughout the county. The extent only the county does that and cities within the county don't do that, then you could theoretically have a amassing of the licensees in a given city. So I think cities still need to consider their own limitations. So.
Okay, very good. Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just to build on what the city attorney mentioned, that's exactly the conversation that was happening this last week at the county. So the county did host, as Jen mentioned, cities throughout the county to come in and talk about this issue. What the county is trying to prevent is to say, okay, well, if our limit is 10 throughout the county, we don't want to give all those 10 licenses to the city of Victoria and make city of Victoria or whatever city the hot spot for cannabis. So there was certainly some discussion about, and again, treading in there's a lot of unknowns here, and again, a lot to unpack. So what kind of came out of that conversation was cities kind of throughout the county kind of landing on adopting our own ordinances to limit whether it's the one or more than one, wherever you're going to be, and then the county would take that into consideration more broadly. And then how that's actually going to work out, they're trying to figure out between now and the public hearing when they're going to be discussing this on November 19th.
Okay, yeah, there's just a weird dynamic between, is it going to be fed up from the cities to the county, or is the county going to come down and say, this is our limit? And it sounds like they're interested in hearing from us about what we're interested in doing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I think that's absolutely accurate. One of the things that we're not discussing tonight, but we'll be coming back to you, is about responsibility for two things: regulation and regulation and registration. And so what we will have to decide as a city is, are we going to manage our own registration and regulation? And I think we had been talking to a number of our different cities throughout the communities. I think people are, the cities within Carver County are a little bit all over the board. And so we're going to be continuing to evaluate what makes the most sense for us, and as we understand what those what the expectations are, how much of a draw on resources will it be to go through that registration process, so we can come back and make a recommendation for you. But we suspect that will probably be packaged and brought to you sometime after November 19th, because we really want to have an understanding of where the county lands on the adoption of their ordinance and what they may or may not be offering as a service for cities in terms of registration and regulation.
Very good, thank you. All right, council, questions, comments? Councilmember Gunderson, please.
I don't know if I've ever actually asked this question, but Travis, you said something that Pete, are we size of the building? Because you said something about our industrial area, which is where we would put our big box stores. We wouldn't actually have to, we would not permit a Costco for cannabis, would we? I mean, that's, I mean, I'm talking about the size of the store now, just because that, I mean, one store, whether it's 500 square feet or 500,000 square feet, is one permit. Is that like, I'm trying to wrap my head around it because you said it. Is that where we're going? Are we able to restrict the size of the store, or are we?
Councilmember, that's an excellent question. We would have the ability to put reasonable restrictions in our performance standards of the use itself. There's other communities that have put some of those standards in their draft ordinances, as well as I believe with St. Paul's already passed their ordinance. So there's some information that we're looking at for what other cities have already gone through the process that are ahead of us. So it's not 100% on what that looks like, but with retail, we can set reasonable conditions based on the size. If there's a cultivation or some type of farming or greenhouse or something like that, we can set reasonable restrictions based on the size and make sure that certain standards are met. So those are different things that we're looking at that would be separated out from just the single cannabis ordinance, and would go to the performance standards for the zoning as a whole, which we would take a look at and set after the cannabis ordinance would be passed.
Okay, that's a good point, because I think what we're trying to get a little bit too granular here in our ordinance, because a lot of those details will be worked out once somebody makes a presentation or submits a plan for a house. Or plan for, I don't know where that came from. A plan for a business. All right, let's take this first item then, council. Any thoughts or feelings about where you would like to permit retail sales? I see the Planning Commission recommends C1, C2, requiring conditional use. That goes against, I would say Central Business District is where those should be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say central and.
I mean, our South Growth area, I could see though, depending how that develops.
If it was in like the strip mall type.
Right, yeah. What were the restrictions that they want? It says restrict to,
Restricted districts.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'd favor it more here in the Central Business District, and then
In the south.
on a,
I mean, to that point though, are we promoting use downtown? If we're putting in the central, if we're trying to create a walkable community.
well,
And I know that it's illegal outside, but that doesn't seem to stop anyone at a Viking game. So, and I mean, just being honest, I was there yesterday. You walk every 10 feet.
understand.
So, I mean, are we doing that? Are we promoting that here by saying in our central business district? And it's just a question. I don't know. Just want to.
yeah, I think that's an enforcement issue, and yeah, I agree with you. Everywhere you go, it smells like
I was at the high school football game and I smelled it, so.
So, yeah,
I think it does make sense in our south growth area, or south area, that I don't know why we would limit. I know why we would limit the number of stores, but to that point, if we have one downtown and one on the south end, we're not trying to corner the market. We're just trying to compete with other communities.
okay. All right, you got what you need on that one. Let's go to the next one. Hours of operation for retail sales. I would say that this should be consistent with our off-sale liquor.
Agreed.
Okay.
Mayor, and I apologize that I didn't have this question for staff before. I shouldn't be asking now, but is it right that, my understanding is that cities may impose the hour limitations that you have listed here, but they're not otherwise imposed? I don't think state law says this is the limits. Is that right? Okay, so a city would have to impose these time limits.
Just we'd have to have teeth behind them.
Right.
And we'd have to have teeth behind them, right? If we set time limits, what are we doing if they do it?
Yeah, and I preface that by saying staff is obviously contemplating some kind of ordinance here that this would be part of. But for staff's benefit, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about the city would have to impose these limits.
Yes, and Mayor, members of the council, this came up during Planning Commission, and one thing that we discussed as staff with the commission was it'd be really hard for us to regulate, let's say, a local restaurant selling THC seltzers, and then having them stop selling it at 10 p.m. when the rest of the bar or restaurant can stay open until midnight. We just don't know who would enforce that, and I don't even know if that logically would make sense. So that was something that was discussed, hence this topic right here.
But that's on sale, right? This would be off sale.
Mm-hmm.
So
Again, the enforcement piece would just be really difficult
But that's probably the
and confusing.
right? So,
Okay.
I mean, and our biggest thing would be like if we're seeing it have, right, it's not necessarily enforcing it, then you're not going to get a license next time, right? So,
Correct.
what about the pot spa? Where are we? I mean, the spa that wanted to be the first. Where are we at with that? And if they open prior to 11 on Sunday, how are we going to enforce that?
So, Mayor, members of the council, I'll just jump in here real quick. Right now, they have delayed indefinitely any plans to do a spa. So it is just a retail operation right now, and they're open selling like CBD type of products. But
so as right now, they fall under.
Yeah.
Councilmember Gunderson, it would be based on their license too, I believe. What's restricted, just like serving alcohol, would be very similar to that structure.
All right.
kind of on the same. Sorry, I just have a quick question. So, this is maybe a stupid question, but right. So alcohol, right? We give the license to whoever's selling out, right? Like to our restaurants or whatever. And with cannabis, it'll be the state has to approve them correct first, and then we'll license them. So I'm just curious, like, and then maybe because of that whole needing the state approval thing is, we currently do things like give temporary liquor license to businesses. Have we, like, is that even, if someone, like, have we contemplated, like, a business coming and say, we want a temporary cannabis license type thing? Is that even, like, a thing?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. Our viewpoint of that would be similar to like a special events permit that would come to you, public hearing, you'd have the approvals, just like a normal special event permit, like if you wanted to host music past our quiet hours. So that's how we're viewing it at the moment. Dana or Travis, if you have any other input on that.
So, but would they have to go to the state first, though, and get approved and then come and do it?
So Mayor, Council, to that point, we did reach out to OCM to find out what their process is. They're not 100% with the final draft of that process, but it leans more towards the same way that we would do a temporary liquor license, where they would use a state form to apply. They would need to get the city sign off for it and then go through the state to get final approval. And by getting the city sign off, that's where we can have, if we have issues where in the past with a certain applicant or anything like that, can be addressed. and then it'd be a determination of the state whether they would issue that license or not.
Well, and that's a good thing too, because it sounds like, right, like it wouldn't just be like on the whim of, right, like, hey, we're gonna have this part, right, like we want to do it tomorrow, right, like you'd have to probably do it months in advance, right? So because we know,
Correct.
we don't always get approvals and stuff right away, right?
Yeah.
So
I had a thought that in like a temporary liquor license, I think part of the requirement is that you deal with somebody who's licensed, either a caterer that's licensed or you buy from a licensed. And I would assume that this ordinance would have to you have to buy it from a licensed.
Correct.
Yeah, or you.
That's our assumption as well. You couldn't just, Mayor, put up a table downtown and start selling stuff.
Mayor and council, on that point, I mean, just to be clear, it's very analogous to liquor licensing, but it's not the same. Cities are the licensing authority when it comes to liquor. There is a state sign-off in the process. You're right about that, but cities are the licensing authority. Here on cannabis, the state is the licensing authority. There is a city sign-off process, so it's sort of the same thing, but in reverse. And it's, as a matter of state law, you can't sell this at retail without a state license, period. There's no temporary city said it was okay. You have to have a state license, so.
Okay. I don't know if I can say this without laughing, but I got to get through it. So the Lions International or the state group could go to the state and get a license. Would that filter down to their local chapters that then because they're one organization, they want to have a whatever and include cannabis? If their state organization has that license and comes here, would we have to sign off on that for a festival if they wanted to do it? And I'm picking on the Lions, but they're
the ones who do it all.
They're the ones that have that are probably our most regular users of temporary licenses. But it wouldn't be Victoria's chapter; it would be the Minnesota chapter of the Lions. But they want to do something in Victoria. How does that work?
Yeah, Mayor Council, that's I can duck and cover on that one easy. So, yeah, I mean, I think the answer is I don't know, but the reason I don't know is because my understanding is cities are not compelled to provide for temporary licenses, so that will be a city decision about whether you want to provide for that at all. If you do that, you'll have to comply with your own rules, but those will be your rules at that point. And I don't know enough about the Lions and how it's organized to know whether they have a state chapter and then I think I know that there's a Victoria Lions, which is literally a separate entity, but it's part of this, So, but how exactly that will work, we'd have to take a look at.
And these are questions that I think we're going to get the more we get into this.
So,
And not just from them, but from other organizations.
Right, at the Lions baseball tournament, we have a license to sell beer and we want a license to sell gummies.
Right.
And those are two different processes, and they have to go through two different entities. So, heads up on that. People who are looking to do that, it's going to take some time.
Hey, I can see the cannabis and fish fry, right?
Yep.
Maybe it's better cannabis first.
You might get more.
Eat more fish. I don't know. Okay. All right. Do we have enough on this? Are we moving on to the next?
This is like the greatest,
This is
the greatest approval known to man because it's provided entertainment for years on
most
questions.
fun we've had at a council meeting in a long time.
And we're not even on the product yet. At least.
Okay, remind me about the X's and checks again here. What are you expecting from us on these X's and checks?
So Mayor, Council, the X's and check is based on an internal staff discussion that we've had while coming up with a preliminary draft. And these are based on the pros and cons of the operation of these businesses. Now, we're just looking at retail operations. We're looking at the sale of a finished product. We're not looking at the cultivation or the usage or anything like that. This is just the sale of that finished product. And it's just of the flower. So restricting that within 1,000 feet of a school, we looked at our business districts, or not business and non-commercial districts, and would that have an impact on the school, or how our zoning is set up? How does that necessarily work if there's temporary permits and things like that? And restricting it within a school when we're not close enough to any schools as defined by state statute that putting that restriction on would provide
So an X means you are not recommending, staff is not recommending that you include that in the ordinance.
Correct, Mayor.
Got it. Okay. Reading through those, I would probably be I am in agreement with that. Council, other thoughts? Councilmember
Residential, what is residential treatment facility? Are we talking about Steiner Kelting, or are we talking residential homes for
Drug and alcohol treatment,
or
those kinds of things.
would we have those in proximity right now? No. I mean, I'm just curious, why that one specific? I know Steiner Kelting is the only facility right now, but do we have, I mean, we've got Mount Olivet residential homes in the community, but not anywhere kind of outside the school, like the school zone. We don't have anything close enough to downtown or the south area. So I'm just curious why that one.
Mayor and council, in our non-business or in our business districts, you could have a treatment facility, you could have a treatment clinic, and the various licensing that goes with that type of stuff. And this would be the same thing as saying you're allowed in the cannabis sale there, but you'd also allow for the treatment facility. Those two operations could cause issues with each other. So it's looking at just separating out the distance so they're not next to each other.
Yep.
Future.
For future. Yeah.
Future. My only question is then, if the cannabis shop is open before any retail, what happens then if there's a location that we're not putting, how do we make sure that the cannabis business isn't adversely affected by a residential treatment facility coming into a building that we're developing in the south, or in central business, or in the south growth area?
After they're established.
After they're established, that would negatively affect their business. Whatever your opinion is, the business was there. I don't want the residential treatment facility to affect that. I understand the wanting to keep I totally understand that, and I get that. But this would seem to put the treatment facility above the business, in terms of, hey, they were here first, but you can't be within 500 feet, so now you got to move. And I would not want to see that.
Councilor, that's an excellent question. It's actually something that we talked about earlier as staff tonight.
Yeah.
We just haven't had a chance to ask the city attorney about how that process would look if a business coming in or if a treatment facility came in, if that creates a nonconformity, if we can allow that nonconformity to be created with a cannabis business, or if that 500 restriction is whoever's first.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's. I don't want to speculate about that sitting here, but that's a good question. Yep.
So if we can, in the event that it happens, let's just make sure we got everything in order to make sure that with the business, because that's what we want here if it's an upstanding business.
So then on that kind of subject, so we have an X, so you don't think we need the one regarding the daycare? I guess I'm wondering about that, because I'm thinking, because that would say that we don't need that, right? The X is saying, but technically, say the property by the fire station, right? That's part of our central business, right? And so there at one point was talk of a daycare going there. But
We have a daycare out here by the.
right in cannabis. So but wouldn't we want to say we shouldn't have it within 500 feet of that?
What does our liquor ordinance say? Does our liquor ordinance restrict any of this?
I don't believe.
City clerk, do you know off the top of your head, Claudia?
I kind of think that there's some consistency that should happen between
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
this.
I mean, school one makes sense to me because it's not in our business district, right? So it's not relevant. But
Or athletic
a
fields.
daycare could, right, be so. Do we
With it becoming legal, it clearly shows that there are enough people that want this product. And many of those people are going to be the same people that utilize a daycare facility. I mean, reasonably thinking. As long as business isn't, right, the big tobacco got in trouble for advertising towards children, right? And that's why they've got all the lawsuits. As long as the cannabis business isn't actively advertising or promoting child usage, I don't see if it's within a reasonable business district, I think that is okay. I mean, to not get to where's 500 feet from the.
That's true. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
And Councilman Gunderson, that's exactly the discussion we had internally, was if it's, signed properly, it looks nice, it, like any other business use, that's kind of why we went this route.
I mean, we want a walkable downtown. We want people to use it. If there's a cannabis business that is doing things the way that we're asking them to do things, like we ask other businesses to do, I don't see you're not going to see, so long as they're not right side by side, like you're not even going to notice like it's within 500 feet.
And also to your point that you previously just stated was we don't want to prohibit one business over the other. So how do you choose who gets priority, essentially of that use?
It's not, we have, the state did cover us on, we only need to allow one right now. Yeah. Right. And if we decide we can allow more. I probably won't ever use it, but we'd like to have one downtown and we'd like to have one in South Grove to stay relevant, stay competitive. I think we need to be able to allow for that to happen, and putting a restriction on how many feet away from the ABC Junction over there is not gonna work.
All right. Any other comments on this? All right. Next slide.
I think we got what we need.
Next up. So going back to, or Mayor Council, going back to the timeline that we have, the next step will be putting together a draft ordinance that we'd be able to present to the Planning Commission for review and comment to look at the direct language. And that would just still be just a discussion only, and then bring it back to the council. And that way, when we do schedule a public hearing later this fall, we're all ready to go and we can keep things moving and stay in line. There is some flexibility in what might happen over the next couple months before we have a final draft ordinance, just because OCM still needs to finalize. There's a report they need to submit to the legislature as well. So there's still just a handful of things in the air.
Travis, did we get a model ordinance from OCM? I know there was this conversation that, yes, correct, yes. You did, okay, they did get that done.
Yeah,
okay, very good. All right, anything else on this topic?
I got a whole bunch, but
I can save that for another day. Okay. All right, they've got what they need, and there are no more items on the regular agenda. So that with that, we're going to move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, you're up first.
Mayor, Council, I don't have anything to add beyond what we've talked about.
All right, very good. Ms. Hardy, anything from staff?
None from staff, Madam.
All right, members of the council?
Great turnout at the fire station open house. I stopped by before the meeting and I don't know, 300-400 people.
Oh my gosh. Good.
So it was unbelievable to see.
Love that.
A lot of excitement. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? All right. Since there are no more items to come before the body this evening, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.